As someone who has suffered from burnout, I'm quite passionate about sharing what I've learned to get through that. So sharing a few different videos today, just around understanding your own body and your mind and the things that we can do. So referring back to the spaces that we can create, it's really important to have this, because what happens is things become too much. Our bodies go into that fight or flight mode. This also creates physical symptoms within the body, and before you know it, it can be too much. It's difficult to cope. You don't know exactly what to do next, and that feeling of being really overwhelmed, it takes over, and then there is no choice but to stop. So creating the space to make small changes and to have these chances to stop, it's really, really important. Now, mindfulness has become a foundation for me, which is why I now teach it, and meditation. I love them both. And while I will have noise-filled meditations or lots of thoughts present, I still try and take the time. There's no routine to my structure. I mean, some people prefer to do things when they get up in the morning, when they go to bed, but the most important thing is making that time whenever it suits you will help you. So if you think about being in a situation of burnout or anxiety, I'm going to focus on this specifically because it's something I've personally dealt with. It's something you don't really want to sit with, but without realizing, it comes up again and again. And the funny thing is, well, not funny, but the strange thing is, and that I see more now, it's actually easier for you to associate with the discomfort and the anxiety than it is to feel strong and well and worthy when you've been on that loop. So for me, if I were asked to sit with how I was feeling in the anxious or stress periods, I could instantly connect with that. It was quite comfortable to get there. If someone asked me, oh, how does it feel to feel supported and worthy and strong and focused, I couldn't get there at all. It was far easier and more comfortable to connect with the anxiety. So unraveling this has been a really long journey. As I said, mindfulness and meditation is a foundation for me. And I'm going to use the analogy that I use with children, and I have shared a similar video before. But this here, we're going to just focus on anxiety this time. So thinking about this is you before anxiety came along, before that stress came along, before you were overwhelmed, when you were in a state of mind where, of course, you had different things that were stressful, but you were able to cope with them. So this is where we begin. We start like this, and before we know it, over time, we have these anxious patterns creeping in. So just really explaining this again. So this is what being a little bit anxious may look like. Tiny bit of anxiety here. You can see it just there on the surface. It's okay, it's bearable, there's still some space. And before you know it, it gets more present and it becomes a daily routine, a go-to mechanism. Like stress, it creeps in far quicker. And you can't quite see through it the same anymore. It becomes the thing that you go to all the time. So you're really, really anxious. So that anxiety, it's here. But the most important thing is that we see it, that we notice it, and we lean into this feeling. So this here is the anxiety jar. Your anxiety is present and we're not shying away from it. It has built up over time, but what can you do? Things can sit on the surface, but before too long is what happens. They will sink down to the bottom. So if we don't connect with, notice, lean into, or acknowledge the feelings of anxiety, pretend it's not there, not ask for help or support, this anxiety will settle and it can't be seen as easily. It will sink to the bottom. And sometimes it's harder to even acknowledge that it's there because it's buried. But when we stop and we really start connecting with how we're feeling, all feelings welcomed, all good emotions, there's a vast range of emotions that we don't even access. There's hundreds of them, but when we're thinking about this as anxiety, this sort of fearful, worried nervousness, this feeling then becomes our base. And if not seen, over time you can see it's gradually just sinking from the surface down to the bottom. But when we're stopping and we're meditating, we're being mindful, we're acknowledging it, we're noticing it, we're leaning into it, we can bring it from the surface. We can see that, but also we can see everything that's sunk down to the bottom. So we can see it all. So now it's not all on the bottom. We can see all of that anxiety. We're looking at it. We're acknowledging these feelings, and we're meeting that with a bit of kindness, a bit of compassion, asking for help if we need to. And these are the things that make the difference. These are the things that make the huge difference. All of that anxiety has space to be seen, and it's from this place that you can start detaching from it. So the first step I would say is acknowledge all your anxiety, acknowledge all the stress that you might be feeling. If it's at work, ask a colleague, reach out for help, speak to someone, or privately write something down, notice how you're feeling, because burnout doesn't have to take place. There are things we can do to prevent it. And when you start making the small changes, things really do start to look clearer.